And this really does paint a vivid picture of the challenges we face. This fundamental disagreement over the interpretation of the Second Amendment creates a major obstacle to legislative progress. The debate often devolves into emotional arguments, making it difficult to find common ground. Both sides point to statistics and studies to support their positions, but these are often interpreted selectively or disputed altogether. This creates a stalemate that hinders meaningful action on gun control. Trump's stance on gun control resonated strongly with his base, solidifying their support and mobilizing them politically. His administration rolled back several Obama-era gun control measures, signaling a clear shift in federal policy. Trump's presidency further intensified the debate on gun control, deepening the divide between opposing sides. His legacy on this issue continues to shape the political landscape, influencing the discourse and policy decisions even after his presidency. This deep polarization makes it increasingly difficult to have constructive conversations about gun control. Common ground seems elusive as each side views the other with suspicion and distrust. The lack of nuanced understanding and empathy hinders progress on this critical issue. Addressing the root causes of this polarization is essential to fostering a more productive and respectful dialogue on gun control. Rodrigo Duterte, the former president of the Philippines, is a highly controversial figure known for his unorthodox leadership style and his brutal war on drugs. Duterte's rise to power was fueled by public frustration with crime and corruption, and he promised swift and decisive action. His methods, however, drew widespread condemnation from human rights groups and international organizations. Extrajudicial killings, often targeting suspected drug users and dealers, became commonplace under his administration. Duterte's supporters lauded his tough stance on crime and his willingness to challenge the status quo. They argued that his methods were necessary to restore order and discipline in a society grappling with lawlessness. Critics, however, argued that Duterte's policies eroded the rule of law and created a climate of fear and impunity. They accused him of authoritarian tendencies and human rights violations, sparking international concern and scrutiny. Despite their vastly different backgrounds and leadership styles, Donald Trump and Rodrigo Duterte found common ground in their shared pragmatism and their aversion to traditional diplomatic norms. Both leaders prioritized their own country's interests above all else and were willing to challenge established international protocols to achieve their goals. This shared worldview led to a surprisingly warm relationship between the two leaders. Trump reportedly praised Duterte's controversial war on drugs, drawing criticism from human rights advocates. Their interactions, characterized by informality and a disregard for diplomatic niceties, reflected their shared disdain for what they perceived as excessive bureaucracy and political correctness. This pragmatic approach extended to their foreign policy decisions, where both leaders prioritized bilateral agreements and transactional diplomacy over multilateralism and international cooperation. Beyond their personal rapport, Trump and Duterte's relationship was also shaped by converging security interests in the Asia-Pacific region. Their interactions were not just about personal chemistry, but were deeply rooted in the geopolitical realities of the time. Both leaders found themselves navigating a complex web of alliances and rivalries, with the Asia-Pacific region being a focal point of their foreign policies. Both leaders viewed China's growing assertiveness in the South China Sea with concern, albeit for different reasons. For Trump, the South China Sea represented a critical juncture where American influence was being directly challenged by an increasingly bold China. The strategic waterways were not just about territorial claims, but also about control over vital shipping lanes and underwater resources. Trump saw China's actions as a challenge to American dominance in the region and a threat to the established world order. His administration's stance was clear: to counteract China's ambitions and ensure that the United States remained the preeminent power in the Asia-Pacific. This involved not only military posturing, but also economic and diplomatic efforts to rally other nations against China's assertive moves. Duterte, while wary of China's growing influence, also saw an opportunity to leverage Beijing's economic might to further his own country's development. The Philippines, under Duterte's leadership, sought to balance its economic needs with its security concerns. Chinese investments in infrastructure were welcomed, but not without a cautious eye on the potential strings attached. This shared concern over China's actions created a strategic convergence between the United States and the Philippines. The disputed territories in the South China Sea became a symbol of the broader struggle for influence in the region. Both nations understood that their cooperation was essential in presenting a united front against China's territorial ambitions. Trump's administration sought to strengthen military ties with the Philippines, seeing it as a key ally in containing China's expansionist ambitions. Joint military exercises, increased defense aid, and strategic dialogues were all part of this effort to bolster the Philippines' defense capabilities and ensure a robust American presence in the region. Duterte, while pursuing closer economic ties with China, also recognized the importance of maintaining a strong security relationship with the United States as a counterbalance to Beijing's growing influence. This dual approach allowed the Philippines to benefit from Chinese investments while still relying on American military support to safeguard its sovereignty and regional stability. The delicate balancing act between these two superpowers highlighted the complexities of modern geopolitics in the Asia-Pacific. Despite their shared interests in security and trade, Trump and Duterte's relationship also faced significant challenges, particularly on the contentious issue of human rights. Both leaders found common ground in their tough stances on security and their desire to strengthen economic ties. However, this commonality was overshadowed by their stark differences in handling human rights issues. The Trump administration's relative silence on Duterte's brutal war on drugs, despite its devastating human toll, drew widespread criticism from human rights groups and some members of the U.S. Congress. This silence was seen as tacit approval of Duterte's methods, which included extrajudicial killings and widespread human rights abuses. Critics argued that the U.S. should have taken a firmer stance against these violations. This divergence on human rights highlighted the inherent tension in the U.S.-Philippines relationship. While the U.S. has historically promoted democratic values and human rights, its muted response to Duterte's actions created a diplomatic rift. This rift was further exacerbated by Duterte's vocal criticism of U.S. policies and his pivot towards closer ties with China and Russia. While the United States has long viewed the Philippines as a key democratic ally in the region, Duterte's authoritarian tendencies and his blatant disregard for human rights posed a significant challenge to this traditional alliance. Protests erupted in the Philippines, with demonstrators calling for an end to the violence and for greater accountability from their government. These protests highlighted the growing discontent among the Filipino population and the international community's concern over the deteriorating human rights situation. The Biden administration has since taken a more critical stance on Duterte's human rights record, signaling a shift in U.S. policy. This shift includes increased support for human rights initiatives and a more vocal condemnation of abuses. The Biden administration's approach aims to restore the U.S.'s commitment to democratic values and human rights, while also seeking to rebuild trust with the Filipino people. However, the legacy of Trump's acquiescence to Duterte's excesses continues to cast a long shadow over the relationship, raising questions about the future of U.S. engagement with the Philippines. The challenge now lies in balancing strategic interests with the imperative to uphold human rights. As both nations navigate this complex landscape, the path forward remains uncertain, but the commitment to addressing these critical issues will be crucial for the stability and strength of their alliance. The future of the relationship between the Philippines and the United States remains uncertain, shaped by a complex interplay of geopolitical factors, domestic political dynamics, and the legacies of past administrations. This relationship has seen various phases, from strong military alliances to periods of tension and reevaluation. The historical ties between the two nations, rooted in colonial history and mutual defense treaties, add layers of complexity to their interactions. The Biden administration's emphasis on human rights and democracy promotion could create friction with the Philippines, particularly if it is seen as interference in its internal affairs. President Biden's foreign policy agenda prioritizes human rights, which may clash with the current administration in the Philippines, especially on issues like the war on drugs and extrajudicial killings. This could lead to diplomatic strains if not managed carefully. However, shared concerns over China's assertiveness in the region could also provide a basis for continued cooperation on security issues. Both nations recognize the strategic importance of the South China Sea and the need to counterbalance China's growing influence. Joint military exercises, intelligence sharing, and strategic dialogues are some of the ways they can strengthen their security partnership. The Philippines' own strategic calculus is also evolving. The country is increasingly aware of its geopolitical significance and is seeking to leverage this to its advantage. This involves not only military considerations, but also economic and diplomatic strategies. The country is seeking to chart a more independent course in its foreign policy, balancing its relationships with the United States and China. This balancing act is delicate, as the Philippines must navigate the benefits and risks associated with both superpowers. Economic investments from China and security guarantees from the US are both crucial to the Philippines' national interests. The outcome of this balancing act will have significant implications for regional stability and the future of the US-Philippines alliance. A misstep could lead to increased regional tensions, while successful navigation could enhance the Philippines' standing as a key player in Southeast Asia. Open communication, mutual respect, and a willingness to address each other's concerns are essential to navigating these complex dynamics. Diplomatic channels must remain open, and both nations need to engage in continuous dialogue to understand each other's perspectives and priorities. This will help in building a resilient and adaptive partnership that can withstand the challenges of an ever-changing geopolitical landscape.